All right, let's get started. So today is October 3rd. This is Kubernetes SIG cloud provider meeting. So in the past, we've been pretty bad. Well, Chris has been pretty good about it, but I've been pretty bad about doing intros at the beginning of every SIG meeting. So if there's anyone new to the SIG today, just wanted to give like a minute or two just to give a chance to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, this is Stephen Augustus. I am a solutions architect at Red Hat. I'm currently leading SIG Azure, the product management chair, and I do a bunch of release team stuff. So, hey.
Welcome.
This is Kendrick Coleman, kind of just following on with Stephen around here. I'm not going to make my face too familiar around here. I'm just here to help do an update for 113 as we get to it.
I'm Aish. I'm also here as part of the 113 release team, just to say hi. Yeah.
I'm Andrew Shen. I'm a tech writer on Kubernetes. Just checking in and saying hi.
All right, welcome everyone. So let's get started. So first on the list is from Kendrick. Update on 113 timeline and discuss features.
Yeah, I'm actually going to hand this over to Aish. I didn't know she was going to make it, so I hijacked it with inside of the note. So I'm going to hand it over to her.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick thing and then leave it to Kendrick too. So I just wanted to say hi and introduce myself. I'm Aish, and I'll be the 113 release lead for Kubernetes, which started, the release cycle itself started on Monday, and it goes till the first week of December. So currently we are planning to release on the 3rd of December, which means it's a super short cycle with just 10 weeks. I sent out an update to Kubernetes developers about the schedule itself and a few process changes there. So we just wanted to take this time to just highlight that the release is super short, and hence encourage the various SIG leads and feature owners to plan any features, keeping that constraint cycle time in mind. And Kendrick was going to, we'll start formally collecting features starting next Monday, October 8th. So in case you feel anything needs an issue opened in the features repo, please go ahead and do that. And I also specifically wanted to know if there were any docs updates that were being planned as part of 113 from the cloud provider SIG itself. I remember seeing something about this in the community meeting last week, so just wanted to find out more about it if you guys have any info at this point. Kendrick, did you wanted to add anything?
Yeah, the only other thing, really, there's kind of just one big outstanding feature here, and that's, of course, out-of-tree cloud provider support that's within inside of the K features repo. It's currently not tagged with a milestone. However, within inside the notes, it said that it could make it in 113, could make it to 114, depending on if it's going to be stable enough. So if you know what that's going to be now, that'd be cool. I can tag it. If not, if we want to defer it to 114, then we can do that. But I know there is a lot of push that a lot of people are looking this for 113. So if we want to go ahead and track it and kind of be this, one of the major milestones that everybody, or sorry, one of the major features that everybody kind of wants to look at, we can do that as well.
Cool, yeah. So I don't think that 113 is going to be realistic for that. So definitely I think we should defer it. But if anyone else wants to comment on the out-of-tree support, or like, sorry, the full out-of-tree support where all the providers are actually out-of-tree. Yeah, anyone have comments on that?
Yeah, I can say from, at least from the SIG Azure side, that is, I'm kind of still corralling cats and stuff, so that will probably be hard to do. I think 114, 115 looks more realistic.
Are we commenting on the fact that we want to GA all the providers out of tree, or just that the fact that the interface that we have is considered GA? because the latter, I think it's more achievable. Obviously, having everybody out of tree by 113 is not realistic. But when it comes to the actual interface, which is, I guess, what we can call a feature in Kubernetes, I think that is realistic.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should clarify that going forward.
Yeah, but I think there's a few things. We've got the interface, we've got the out-of-tree providers, and we have the current batch of in-tree providers. I think CCM working with out-of-tree providers probably GA if Andrew is happy with that. I'd love to get the interface to at least be in staging, but I think anything beyond that's probably not doable. And my guess is that for the majority of the in-tree providers, just getting a sort of alpha level out of tree experience is probably going to be a stretch for 113.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of had the same exact thoughts as what Fabio had mentioned as well. I'm not going to anticipate any out of tree providers are going to be ready to go, especially GA, because I know there's just a few that are targeting for just having some sort of a release for 113. I think I was more or less looking at the interface itself, if that's going to be ready to go for the whole ecosystem to start developing around it.
Yeah. I feel like there's some sort of blocker, like kind of a psychological blocker, and holding back a little bit on the work for out of tree cloud provider because the interface is not considered stable or GA. I feel like there's like this, which is a misunderstanding because the interface has been there for a long time. So, but I think like validating that and making it official that it's GA, so people can be more confident in spending time and working on out of tree providers will be a nice step forward. So, I think that if we consider that stable and maybe set a target for 113 to move everything to staging, and if we consider that realistic, I think maybe go for it.
So I mean,
I
think we've got to. Hey, Jago, sorry. I think we got to be very careful what we define in that grouping. For instance, node lifecycle controller still pulls in the cloud provider interface. And while I've been working with the SIG node to get that gone, I don't think that that's necessarily something they've committed to. And that's just one example of places in core Kubernetes where we still have a pretty strong reliance on the cloud provider interface.
That's a good point. And I was going to just suggest that typically when an API moves from beta to stable, it requires some amount of soak time and feedback loop in order to ensure that the API is in fact stable. It's a very hard backwards compatibility guarantee that we're offering when we move that API from beta to stable. And it is really unfortunate when we find that we either have a breaking change or have to version the API. That's much more challenging to accomplish. So I think if we want to take that step, we need to at least put in some gate with solid reviews and some clear sign off by folks who currently have in-tree cloud providers to ensure that their use cases will be met with the interface that we are considering stable. So that would be my requirement if we want to call that GA, is just to ensure that those that intend to move out have had a chance to really dig deeply into it. And that's sometimes non-trivial to find the right people to make that effort.
I agree. I think there could probably still be room for feedback loop for anybody that's developing for out of tree to actually test with what's there and then actually make adjustments, because who knows how much burn-in time it's really had.
I think
and just following on Aisha's comment about the shortness of Q4, it's even shorter than it looks, even when you know it's short.
Yeah.
Everyone starts to leave. The people you need to review are not around. There's family, there's travel.
Yeah, there are a couple of KubeCons, and the code freeze kind of falls around that time. So
it ends up being a mess. So I just caution us to not be overly ambitious on that one.
yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So I think whatever we decide, that we need to explicitly note that in the future, because it sounds like it's not currently. So maybe we can lay out some of these cases in the feature issue itself.
Cool. Yeah, I think we should do more discussion offline, and then we'll update the features issue soon.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Anything else for that? All right, next one is docs update.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Andrew. I'm from SIG Docs, and I met last week with like Federico and Walter and Han about the cloud provider documentation, and it sounds like you guys want to kind of refactor that and stuff. And but after talking to them, it sounds like we also kind of have to think about the user experience. So Cody Clark, who's another tech writer on my team, who's on the conference video conference right now, we're going to be working on redoing the path from the docs homepage to like an area, you know, for the cloud provider documentation. And we're going to put together a proposal for you guys in terms of like what that structure might look like and how, you know, we can all sort of organize, because it seems like we need to first kind of explain what the different like types of solutions are, and then before we get into like, you know, the list of providers and what solutions they specifically have. So I don't have anything that much right now, but we're working on the proposal, and then I will present it here at a future meeting.
So I think there's an active KEP for cloud provider documentation. Are those? I would want to see those efforts merged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there seems to be two different efforts for that. So like one is from SIG Docs around how do we expose cloud providers to new users, and then the other one is like what we're kind of working on, which is what documentation does every provider need to work on that we can kind of glue together into that other doc. And so just to clarify, that what we are pushing for is the latter, and what we are kind of hoping that SIG Docs would do is the former.
Yeah, so I'll be working on sort of the on-ramp part.
Okay, cool.
And Andrew, do you have an idea of when you'll be able to provide that proposal?
Honestly, the timeline's a little tight because we have a doc summit next week, and then after that, like a Google-wide doc summit. So, like, how soon do you think you guys would need?
I guess the question is it before Thanksgiving or after New Year's?
Oh, I think we can get it done before Thanksgiving.
Just for my understanding, so that should be rolled into the doc updates for 113, or will there be any kind of, is there any link between the docs work that needs to go for the 113 piece itself?
It sounds like this is a proposal and will require some discussion, so probably not in 113. Is that fair, Andrew?
Yeah, I think so, especially if 113 is going out the beginning of December.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Have you looked at that KEP and determined whether this is going to change it, expand it, or perhaps you haven't looked at it?
No, I looked at it. I'm really trying to like link up to it, and then maybe like do, you know, the Google Cloud Docs in that way to just make sure, you know, this is sort of in line with that. And if we're all in agreement with that, that's how the cloud provider should be organized, then we'll do that part. But then Cody and I are also looking at the, you know, flow from like the docs homepage to that section where the cloud providers will be, and explain like the different just solution types in general, so that users have a better understanding of like, you know, what might be, you know, better for their particular situation.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I'm working on some pieces of documentation right now, and I don't want to wait until the structure rules are in place, because we can edit it and reformat it as needed, and it shouldn't stop documentation effort that is underway now and maybe even needed now.
Yeah, I don't think that it should hold back anyone or, you know, be a blocking issue. I think these things can go in parallel, and then we should at some point link up and just make sure that it all, you know, works well together. But yeah, I definitely don't want to, you know, hinder your documentation efforts.
And to be clear, there, Andrew is actually representing two roles in this one conversation. In one role, he is the GCP representative who is bound by the decisions that this SIG has made about the organization and structure of the cloud provider documentation. In the other role, he's representing SIG docs, which is taking on the how to reference those that documentation across cloud providers.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out, Jago. Yeah. So yeah, those are the two pieces, like the actual GCP documentation, but then like the general like Kubernetes.io kind of user experience path to the cloud docs or the cloud provider docs.
I think that was Steven. Steven, did that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great.
Cool. So while we're on this topic, I think there are some like very vocal people in the Kubernetes community about how crappy the docs are. And so I think, at least from our point of view, we should really push for doing the provider specific parts of the docs so that when Andrew has the proposal up, we can kind of link things together really quickly. So this is kind of just kind of me begging everyone to work on those docs. Yeah. All right. So is that all for the docs update, Andrew? Anything else?
Yep. As far as I know.
Cool. All right. So next one's mine. So in the top of the agenda, I added a new issues and to-dos for new contributors. So based on a conversation I had with, I think, Caleb a while back and Nishi recently, we're noticing that there's a lot of like kind of easy to medium issues that we have under SIG Cloud Provider that we can be kind of offloading to new contributors instead of us trying to tackle it ourselves. And so this is kind of something I figured we can try out and see if it'll help people kind of with membership or whatever. So if you have kind of like generic cloud provider or specific to your cloud provider issues that you think are like sort of easy to medium that you want to put on the agenda, that'd be great. And then we can kind of assign those to any new contributors that are looking to make contributions. So that was more of an FYI.
On this topic, can I suggest we consider some sort of mentorship program? I know API machinery, we do a lot better when we have mentors for new contributors. The code is complicated on the API machinery side, and I think a lot of the goals and how we do things and what we need to do on cloud provider is going to be similarly complicated. And rather than having people get lost or not understand where certain things belong, it would make a lot of sense if we get someone who's genuinely interested to sort of assign them a mentor.
I totally agree with that. Like, I've certainly been on the reviewing side of PRs that did not, you know, that like had we worked on them together would have saved a lot of time. So like I am very much of the like work together up front and get everyone aligned and knowing the code base so that then you don't have to sort of iterate and sort of discover it incrementally. So it is actually time saving.
So it sounds like we have our first two volunteers for mentorship opportunities. We can add that to the top of the doc as well, Andrew.
All right, let me do that.
Dang it.
Yeah, I'll do that after the meeting.
And definitely reach out to Paris with her experience with running kind of our cohort mentoring, especially for kind of setting that baseline. Like, this is the code base. This is how we're going to try and review your pull requests. You can get a lot of, I guess, efficiency by being able to mentor with one mentor to, you know, and mentees for that kind of baseline stuff.
Cool. Yeah, I figured we can do the bare minimum on our end just to have those issues open, and then we can kind of move forward with maybe say contributor or something going forward. But yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so next one is also mine, which is proposing the cloud provider extraction working group. So this is the work that Walter kind of started with putting all the provider code into staging and then dealing with the dependencies that come with that. So I had proposed that Nishi and Walter kind of take the lead on that. And the point of proposing a working group is so that we just have more focus and we have like a dedicated time slot and agenda and everything so we can track this work. And also because it'll be kind of temporary, because once we have the providers out of Kubernetes/Kubernetes, we wouldn't need the working group anymore. Which kind of goes into the next point. The idea, so if you read the PR, there are some comments about whether the working group should be a sub-project instead of a working group. And so Stephen kind of has a proposal separate from this, but kind of changes the way we might want to outline this. So Stephen, do you want to give an update on that PR?
Yeah, sure. So this is kind of along the lines of some SIG release stuff. We're getting ready to spin up a bunch of sub-projects kind of around like release team, release engineering, things like that. And we realized there's not really an efficient way to kind of present each of the mechanisms to like contact people or understand all of the repos that that you can reach out to us on or that we own. So this PR is more cosmetic than anything. It kind of restructures some of the generator code that allows you to define sub-projects as if they're either federations of different repos or actual I don't know, committees or kind of actual sub-projects that have chairs and are dedicated on some specific focus. So I think that SIG Cloud Provider is, I'm not sure because I haven't been following all of the meetings or anything, but I think that SIG Cloud Provider is kind of like ripe for this use case as well. The way I envision SIG Cloud Provider is having like SIG Cloud Provider proper and then a bunch of sub-SIGs that own all of the bits for the relevant cloud providers underneath them. I think right now, I'm not sure whether the cloud provider AWS and the ones that are already within SIG Cloud Provider are referencing the migration from in-tree to out-of-tree stuff, or is it saying that this is code that this SIG or this former SIG owned? So I think that delineation would be useful.
Yeah, and in our charter, we had mentioned that our future goal is to have providers in the kind of sub-project category of SIG Cloud Provider, but we only use sub-projects because it was either sub-projects or working groups, and sub-projects made more sense because it was kind of more geared towards like longer term initiatives.
So yeah, maybe just a little context on this. This proposal kind of broke my brain and I was stunned a little bit into silence because this SIG started as SIG or working cloud provider working group with exactly that string. And then when the scope expanded, it migrated from being a working group to being a SIG, partially specifically because there would be ownership of some code. So from my perspective, this seems like it is maybe useful to break out into a sub-project so that folks who are interested in cloud provider related topics that are not specific to extracting the cloud providers might get benefit out of the meeting, but it seems more like meeting time organization and agenda jockeying than a separate working group.
Yeah, pretty much. Like,
and part of the output of this effort to extract the cloud providers from in-tree is does result in code that needs to be owned, and a working group cannot own code.
Yeah, I would agree with Jacob's points there.
Yeah, I don't think the intention was that the working group owns code. Really, all we need is just like a dedicated time slot and a separate agenda. And so if there is something else that makes more sense that satisfies those two things really, then I think that works.
Can we just have another meeting under SIG Cloud Provider and just call it, you know, a focus group or some other description of it, but without necessarily having a separate working group. It requires,
I do like this sub-project because there's that kind of responsibility and accountability. So I don't necessarily imagine that the SIG lead should be the owners or accountable for the cloud provider extraction specifically. So I do think that containing that work in a sub-project makes sense. But yeah, I mean, if you're just looking for a meeting time, then there's nothing stopping you from having multiple meetings.
And on that note, I would actually like to advocate anyone who's interested. There is a regular Thursday, 11 Pacific time meeting for this. So Stephen, for instance, if you're interested, please join us tomorrow at 11.
Yeah, it's really fun. We mostly talk about Go dependencies. It's great.
So I think to the subject project versus working group point, we still have an issue, maybe not us ourselves, but there seems to be some confusion about what the scope of a sub-project is versus what the scope of a working group is. And there are some active PRs from like steering and stuff, but I think one of Tim Sinclair's questions were, is this stuff essentially like around sub projects, and I think he said it'd be nice to have Slack details and Slack details and chair details for sub projects, and then Aaron said sub projects don't have chairs, and I don't necessarily find that to be true, and Tim doesn't feel that way either. So I think there's a confusion around like from the governance level, like what is a sub project, and I think that a sub-project can be whatever a SIG wants it to be, as long as it's properly organized. So I think there's flexibility for if this is a federation of some sets of code versus like these are committees that live within the SIG to do some action. Right?
Well, actually, a sub-project that owns code actually has some people that are officially referenced as owners of that code. I mean, owners file, that's what they're being used for. So if this new sub-project or whatever we're going to call it is going to own code, we're going to have an owner file. That owner file, we're going to have people in it. So there's still, the accountability part of things taken care of, even though there's no like clear appointed leaders or chairs in that specific sub-project.
So does this responsibility get cast specifically to a provider code extraction sub-project, or specifically to cloud provider AWS, cloud provider Azure, and so on and so forth, right? Do we spin something up to delegate the responsibility and then turn down that extraction sub-project?
Well, I definitely think the extraction sub-project, or whatever we're calling it, should actually get turned down once all the cloud providers are gone. That having been said, I think there are going to be two models of code ownership. One is for cloud provider specific code, and one, AWS, GCE, and one is for code which is general across cloud providers for things like route controller and the cloud node controller, things like that.
And I think that's where I come back to. It doesn't make sense to have a temporal group to own code which will live into perpetuity. So working groups being temporal doesn't seem like the right parking spot for that. And I still think it's just about agenda and time frame to respect people's time as much as possible when we're talking about docs, and those people don't care about the docs or vice versa. So I think if we organize the agenda, this meeting typically has an hour and we don't use the whole hour. So even as it sounds like there's already a meeting time for the extraction initiative, which is great. Keep that if it's useful. I would say please reach out and make sure that there are not folks in Europe or Asia who are missing it because of the time. But other than that, there's no reason not to meet whenever you want. And I would prefer to avoid the working group, both to save my own brain from going into infinite loop, memento style, and because I don't think it's the right mechanism for what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like I literally, like the only reason I chose a working group because it lets me like set a time and a channel and agenda. So like if that works with the sub projects, that's fine with me. I like what you said though about just allocating maybe like the last 15 minutes or the whatever remaining time you have in this meeting to talk about the extraction instead of a separate time slot. Walter, do you think that might be a good idea going forward?
I'm okay with it, but I think really we should chat with the team tomorrow on that subject.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
So Andrew, and this is more, I'm planning on writing a letter to steering to like have sub projects better defined. So you decided to think about working groups simply because the code organization on Kubernetes community was easier to do if you did it via working group.
Yes. So like I don't think there's any way in the SIG.yaml file to actually specify like, oh, there's a separate meeting for this specific sub project. So yeah.
Okay. That's what my PR does. So if you if you want to say words on it, go for it.
Yeah, we'll do.
Well, I think, I mean, whether it's a working group or a sub-SIG or whatever we're calling it, I think while this initiative is going on, having a place where SIG release, SIG docs, SIG node, SIG lifecycle can come, you know, anyone who's an AWS customer with concerns can come and chat about what we're doing, where we're doing it, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, how they can help is really valuable. And so I think having something beyond a meeting has some value, whether it's a working group or it's, you know, something prominent on the SIG cloud provider page. I guess I don't care too much, but I want some way for those people who need to come and talk to that group of people doing the extraction to be able to do so easily.
And I would argue that that's in scope for SIG cloud provider, and that is the mailing list, and that is the forum to ask those questions and get those answers. If in the future, in 6 months or a year, that no longer is true, I would say we revisit the question. Does that sound okay, Walter?
Sounds good.
Others?
Yeah, that works for me.
Sounds good for me.
Cool. So next on the agenda is the updating the provider tracking sheet. So if you are a lead for a provider and you made any updates to either test grid, docs, any new repos or whatever, please update that tracking sheet just so we have a good idea of where everyone's at. And I think that's it for the agenda. Is there anything else that people want to talk about?
Yeah. So just a quick note as someone coming into this a little late. Is there a list of all of the things that we intend to extract? I know, Andrew, you and I were talking about it, but is there a formal list of things that we're planning to move around or put under, say, cloud provider ownership?
So I know Walter had a list. I don't know where the link is anymore, but the plan so far is the cloud interface, which Walter already has a PR to remove that. All the controllers that are specific to cloud providers and all the providers themselves.
And presumably the CCM.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah. That is the list as of today, but it may grow or shrink over time.
Do we have that formalized anywhere?
I thought it was in the KEP that we merged, Walter, or is that?
Some of this is detailed in the KEP, but I don't think we've actually organized it in that way. So we mentioned things that need to be owned and need to be handled and need to be moved. But if you think there's value in actually just saying, we're planning on taking over these pieces, there may be some value in that. I think we can certainly enhance the KEP if we think detailing the data that in that straightforward a way is valuable.
Yeah, because I got a question today at SIG Azure about like the CSI plugins for Azure, and I was like, I don't know. It lives in someone's repo right now, and we want to migrate it into Kubernetes 6. I was like, cool, I would love for you to do that, but I don't know what the list of all the things that I need to kind of cat herd are first. So I think it would be valuable.
Well, and the
So maybe,
CSI one is a special, interesting case because to date, none of the volume logic has ever actually lived in the cloud provider interface. So SIG storage has always done that on the side, and I believe the basic CSI framework is in one repo outside of Kubernetes, and then at least the GCE PD CSI plugin is yet another repo that right now Saad's team owns from storage.
Some people have been using like the cloud provider repo, like OpenStack has been like using it to store CSI plugins as well. So
yeah, and I don't see a problem with that. I don't know if anyone else does, but I mean, it seems like a reasonable organization. I think on Saad, though, as with the GCE PD done, yet another repo on the side.
We actually had a question the other day internally because CSI is not supposed to be Kubernetes specific, but it's more like a standard. So people were kind of, I would say they were kind of looking at the fact that most people want to use, Kubernetes cloud provider XYZ to store CSI plugins that are supposed not to be used only with Kubernetes. So maybe having a separate repo for them makes sense, but I guess that's up to interpretation.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm fairly sure that the SIG storage and Saad's portion of that specifically has been working on that belief that CSI is not Kubernetes specific, and they've been trying to make it more generic.
Yeah, I think it might be good to have maybe someone in this SIG take lead on the storage stuff. I know Walter, you have a lot of information on storage, but you seem pretty busy with all the actual extraction itself as well. So it might be good to have someone to say kind of follow up on that weekly.
Isn't there someone sitting next to Walter? Looks pretty free to me.
Say hello, hon. Hey. Do you feel like volunteering?
Yeah, I can certainly volunteer.
All right, I'll have him start talking to Saad, but I mean, Han is still very much coming up to speed on Kubernetes. I don't want to drown him just yet.
That'll teach you to come to meetings.
No good deed goes unpunished.
I like it.
Cool. Anything else?
I'd like to ask Fabio to please have a mojito for us post-haste.
Will do.
Oh, also, if there's anything specific that that anyone wants discussed during the SIG intro and deep dive during KubeCon, let us know so we can tackle that.
So I don't know who's going to China. Sadly, I'm not, but I think it would be good if we tried to make some time for all of us to meet up in anyone who's actually going to the KubeCon. So I'll definitely go to Seattle. So if we can try and meet up at some point, maybe during the Contributors Summit.
Yeah, I'll be at both.
Yeah, as Andrew said, we have both an intro, which I wouldn't expect to see many of you at, and a deep dive session, which I hope to see many of you at in both Shanghai and Seattle. And the deep dive description that we came up with was more about what the intention of the build and release process is. So I'm hopeful to reach out to some folks from SIG Release as well to expand the scope beyond the process and into the build and release. What are the binaries? What happens in a world where the cloud provider artifacts are not together with the Kubernetes build itself? And what does discoverability look like? What does combination of those things look like? What is validation and versioning? And so it should be an interesting conversation, somewhat dependent on who shows up and what their current pain points are. But please do stop in for that one.
So I would say Doug, I think it's Doug McElhern or something. The last, okay, McEachern. From the last release team, he was the branch manager. He is going to be part of the SIG release deep dive. I believe Caleb is also participating in that one. And Chuck Ha from Heptio. So I would reach out to those guys to kind of wrangle something together. Quick plug. We'll be doing SIG Azure intros and deep dives as well as PM intros and deep dives. So if you're interested about some of the PM process, I'll be rocking those.
Just want to throw it out there. Given I guess many of us will be definitely KubeCon Seattle. Maybe it will be a good, idea to start thinking about if you want to do like a face-to-face meeting, like a proper one. Even it's gonna, if I'm not mistaken, KubeCon Seattle will end up being right after Code Freeze or right before Code Freeze for 113, which means that will be a good point to start talking about 114, which might be, potentially the release where we're gonna end up having a cloud provider interface stable.
Yeah,
and often these face-to-face meetings are a good opportunity to pan the camera back a bit and look farther out. So maybe thinking in terms of 2019 as a whole, and then these video conferences are fine to coast on for the interim. And sorry, Stephen, I think I cut you off. Did you want to say something?
So I was going to say, I think the release will be out before KubeCon Seattle happens. I don't remember the exact date, but it might be December 3rd.
I like the optimism.
We only missed it by 2 days last time.
If we want to plan something, maybe to just put something on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss. If we want to, kind of place, find a meeting room, and spend some time.
Cool. All right. Is anything else? All right, then. See everyone.
Thanks,
Later.
everybody.
Bye, folks.